Education. Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to assume this is happening. First time I've used this system, so bear with me just a moment, please. Do I actually have the chat up here? A chat is waiting for new messages. Ooh, okay, I do have chat. Good evening, Jonathan. Thank you, because now I know it's working. All right, now I just have to figure out how to make this not annoying. Is it, I guess I just see myself little. That's okay, right? The chat adjusted. So this is a program we haven't used before, or I haven't used before. So great. Let's see here. What don't I need? Don't need that. Please tell me I didn't make it actually go away. All right. Now I have made myself go away. Oh, there we go. I should have messed with it. Perfect. Perfect. We're ready. We're good to go then. Okay, I've got my screen. I've got my messages. So I can see your messages from wherever you are. Welcome to Hex Education Live. We haven't done one of these in a while, and I've got all kinds of exciting news to share with you. And then I'm going to do a personal book review, which is going to be quite extensive because I'm a Taurus with a Virgo rising and a Cancer moon. So that's what you get. Blessed be Russell. Let's see here. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give everyone a minute to jump on. Cool. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit, I guess, get started with Hex Education. So Hex Education is a concept that Christian and I came up with because originally Hex Education was a blog talk radio show that he started before I was in the picture. And I produced it for a while, and I co-hosted it for a while. But then we sort of let it go. You know, it was a blog talk show. Blog talk sort of seems like it's seen its day. Everybody was doing it. And that's when I introduced the idea that perhaps we should start doing videos instead of a blog talk radio show. And he liked that. And then we sat on it and didn't do anything with it for a long time. And it was, I believe, in 2019, yeah, that we did start doing videos, and I started my own show, Covendom, and Christian started a show called Hex Offenders. Horrible name, isn't it? Great and horrible. We've both been doing that, but we do those shows out of basically our little studio in Hex, New Orleans. You know, where we have all the equipment, and it's great microphones and everything like that. So when COVID-19 happened, we've sort of put it on hold. However, it is a platform for basically video shows, and it is also a platform for our live streaming classes that you can find. And there are some amazing, remarkable classes on there. Some are free, some cost money once you pay for it. You can watch it perpetually, so that's really cool. And there's some great teachers and authors and psychics and witches on there doing some amazing classes, so I encourage you to check that out. So Hex Education is our platform, and you know, we may end up adding more shows, but right now it's Hex Offenders with Christian Day, the Christian Day Show, and Covendom with me and my lovely co-host Levi Rowland. So, Levi and I are going to resume Covendom here in June. So there's some good news for you. We're going to start it again. Unfortunately, we haven't had an episode since, I think, October or something like that was our last one. And we committed to the first 12 episodes, and then we committed to a second season of 12 more episodes. So we're going to resume those and see where that goes. Very excited. So, we're both basically isolated and practicing social distancing. So I'm like, are you ready to expose yourself to me? So we're going to probably just resume and go down to the store. We could have done something like this and do it from home, perhaps, but it's not the platform we were using. So, and that could happen. If anything else happens, we might do something like this. But we're planning on going into the temple/studio in June and resuming classes. It'll just be the two of us. So, and we're not really exposed to too many other people. So, that's great. So that's what's going on with Hex Education. Though you should any of your fans of Christians, you should pester him into doing his too, because I think he needs the attention to do it. So that's one piece of good news. Another piece of good news is that we've made a little bit of progress with Warlock Press. So this year was originally my goal to release 5 titles. It was a very ambitious goal. And then once again, COVID-19 happened, which put a wrench in everyone's plans for the year. Hello, Karen, blessed be. So we had to revamp our business, try not to go out of business. We had to do a lot of different things like that. So probably not going to make 5 titles. However, I have got a couple really exciting announcements. First of all, I am going to be releasing a hardback edition of my book. Not sure when the pre-sales are going to be going on, but it's going to be in commemoration of the 1-year anniversary of its release, which will be in August. It is going to be a little bit more expensive because it's hardback, and it will be it's beautiful blue and gold with the Alexandrian rosanque on the cover. So for those of you who don't want to look at my beautiful picture. Plugging my book for a second. This is the first title of Warlocks Inc., if you haven't seen it, Initiation into Witchcraft. And it is a rather good book. And I am saying that embracing complete narcissism. Because when I wrote it, I was really afraid of... I'm definitely not an oathbreaker type person, but I was afraid of regurgitating information. So much has been written about witchcraft. So it took me a long time to find my inspiration and my perspective, and it was through creativity and perhaps even divine intervention or divine madness that I found it. So the major hypothesis of this book really comes down to modern witchcraft functions like the mystery cults of old. It doesn't function like tribal paganism. It functions like the mystery cults of old. And and it does give those other roots as well. There's lots in here. There's occult practices, history, my own take. I also tried to give light to the fact that within the modern religion of witchcraft, the priesthood of witchcraft, the 2 major sects, Alexandrian and Gardnerian, have diversity within them. And I tried to point that out, as well as some of the history that I think is relevant to both seekers and practitioners alike, because I think there are a lot of initiates that don't know that maybe what they're doing is not the original thing, which doesn't make it wrong. But I think that people need to understand, have some perspective. Do everything you're going to do with intention, and consciousness, and so it's not picking. Obviously, I'm going to have my own bias because I have the things I prefer. Alexandrian Temple of the Mother line, I will call it. That is my craft preference. It's not all of my craft, but it's my craft preference. And so that's probably going to come through in how I think about things. But I tried really hard to give an honest historical perspective of the lines and honor them all at the same time. There's good and bad with everything, including our own stuff. But this was the first copy, and so we're going to have a hardback version of it come out. More to come, but I always wanted a hardback version of it, so I'm very happy about that. The other title we own as a company is not currently in print, and that's Christian's book, The Witch's Book of the Dead. So you guys need to hassle him about this too. You know, he needs to get his inspiration. So he's determined to come up with a new edition with another chapter or two and, you know, reapproach some of his thoughts in there based on his current practices. But it is in its own right an iconic book because just like I think what was groundbreaking about my book was the fact that it approached modern witchcraft as a mystery cult and an occult tradition, which hasn't really been done by too many people, and it is factual. Christian's book approaches witchcraft's relationship with the dead, which had not been done before he had written it. So it's very unique that way, and was the first book probably any of you read like that. And of course, he's going to get a Warlock's Ink cover, not the old cover, though. Robert is quite beautiful, and he'll somehow appear in the book, I'm sure. So those are our first editions, but Levi is going to be writing a wonderful book about astrology, magical practice in astrology from a craft perspective. We're very excited about it. More to come. And hello, Eric. And as I have said, yes, I can see all the comments, Christian, thank you. I'm not reading them all because I'm talking, so I do talk too fast sometimes. I think is that Virgo energy, or is it my Taurus energy? I don't know. Levi, you tell us. You're writing a book about astrology and the zodiac and all that. Yes, that is a Christian. I guess it's both of ours, but it's his Altar of the Dead. I have some honorings on it, of course. Contributions, but it is an Altar of the Dead. Or an ancestral altar. I think he calls it the Altar of the Dead. An altar of the mighty ones from the death current, we'll call it that. So, anyway, I am also going to be publishing another book, which I didn't think I was going to even a month ago. So I had a book concept in my head, but it was sort of streaming around the ethers and what have you, and that's not the book I'm going to be publishing. So there is another book in the file, but it's not time for that. So I believe this book will be complementary to my last book, Initiation into Witchcraft, and it should probably come out in 2021. I don't think it'll come out in 2020. It might. It is going to be taking a bit more of a creative approach, or at least that's my current thought. But when you begin writing these things, sometimes they take on a life of their own. So, we'll see. And we've got a couple other books in the wings. So I do believe Levi's book will probably come out this year. I believe that that's going to happen. There is another book that may come out this year, but I haven't officially made a deal with that yet. So just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, I'm technically speaking in charge of operations within our company, which with the stores being closed made me really quite useless. So I've been sort of trying to be more of like the talent scout for teachers and authors. So as a publisher, my role within Warlock's Press is to find authors. So if you're interested in being an author, this is what I'm going to tell you. We're not a major publishing company. So we don't have the name like Weiser or Llewellyn. Now, let me clarify that. Neither Weiser or Llewellyn are major publishing companies. They're major in the occult world. They're not really a big deal. Sandra and Leanne's book, they got published by a major publisher. I can't think of who it was. Christian, you can clarify that for him. But that was a major publisher. But here's the deal. Major publishers are not focused on the occult, which is why a lot of times occult practitioners will go to these bigwig things. It's not quite the same as it used to be. So what I'm going to tell you is if you submit your books to whoever you want to submit them to. I did submit my book to Weiser, and Initiation Witchcraft was submitted to Weiser, and it was rejected, and I was told if I wanted to write a book on Norse mythology or hoodoo, they'd be interested. Granted, I don't practice either of those things, so I thought that was a bit shady. But my book's actually doing really well, and I'm sure it's a bit of sour grapes. And it also was the catalyst for Warlocks Inc. And I personally enjoyed having no interference as the publisher, basically self-published because I own the publishing company. I had full control of what went into that book, and I liked that. So what we're looking for in Warlock Press is we want authenticity. So I will only publish people on subjects that require initiation if they're initiated. On magical subjects, I want to see some credibility, or it has to be really good and unique. We're open-minded. Talent is talent. So, but we do want really good magical books or books written by initiates, and so far that is what's happening. So, completely stoked on that. What you do get publishing with us, if you publish with Llewellyn, they may have no one has a broader internet reach. Let's just get that right out there right now. Amazon sales, advertising, you just have to have the know-how. No one has a broader internet reach. We have a very broad internet reach because Christian is an amazing marketer. So our company has amazing marketing online, which is where most of my books seemingly sold. However, we own 4 occult stores in 2 of the biggest occult attractions in America and in the world, and we get massive amounts of foot traffic. So those 4 stores probably outweigh, especially Salem in the month of October. And I've got, like Crowhaven Corner carried my book. Some other occult stores have carried my book. But we get amazing perpetual foot traffic just on those 4 stores. I know other stores have purchased my book. It was on Barnes & Noble's website. I don't know if it ever made it into a store, but it was on their website. And that's with being a small company. But what you do have is you've got really free, great marketing, and you have perpetual front and center foot traffic in New Orleans and Salem, Massachusetts. And Salem, Massachusetts has a lot of traffic in October. I don't know that we will this year. But, that is like the biggest advertisement you could possibly ever have. So we have a lot going for us. However, it is not our full focus. So we will only be taking a limited amount of authors a year. We can only do so many. And I think our reach couldn't be beyond 5 books right now in a year. So right now I'm really looking for probably 5 new authors. And, throughout from now, maybe 7. If I was going to be ambitious, because we will give it our full attention, and they will stay on the shelves. So I'm very, very excited about that. Whereas you get published with Llewellyn, you might get your book in Barnes & Noble's 1 copy. 1 copy in a mix of thousands of books. And these bookstores are not doing well. Our bookstores are doing really well because it's niche. So things to think about if you're looking to be an occultist author. You do want a company that's going to be behind what you do, because the big ones aren't going to be as much in the long run. They want to make money, and they've got lots of different avenues. However, I would say Llewellyn is a better bet right now than Weiser, because it's being run by a Buddhist who doesn't care about any credentials. He's more interested in publishing Buddhism and what have you. And the person who knows most about witchcraft was never initiated and doesn't know much about witchcraft at all. Or how to do her own hair. That will be my tribute to Christian tonight. Okay. So, I do want to say, if you guys want to ask any questions, go ahead and do so, because it's sort of a live... I don't know, will I see any of these questions? I didn't make it very big. I do the videos on my laptop, and it's a kind of a smaller screen, so I might miss your questions. But anyway, yes, great, exciting news. Unfortunately, we are having HexFest online this year and not in person. The good part of that is, normally when we go to HexFest, you can get into only the classes you can get in. There's 3, 4, 5 classes going on at a time. this way you can see every class and it's safe. You know, we're not quite ready as a society to be able to go into person. So, you know, not sure what's going to happen in Salem with Halloween yet. You know, it is the year, so what have you. So okay, so we're going to be doing Covendom in June. We do have a Hex Fest thing going on. If you want to join us, you can watch the class from every presenter at your own leisure. Pick the ones you want to do live. Christian and I will have some other activities, and at your leisure you can watch every presenter. You know, that's actually more opportunity than you get if you go there. Yes, you don't get to meet us all in person, and I do think that's better, but there is a positive side to doing it this way. You have perpetual access to everyone who's teaching a class. So that's exciting. Okay, so I said I'm going to do a book review today, and it's extremely extensive because what I wanted to do is there's so many books I like, and even more I don't like. You know, we probably have 300, 400 books in this house, and I wasn't even able to find a copy of every one, but I did try to find copies of these books. So I wanted to pick books that actually impacted me, and not just books I liked, but also ones that, you know, I can stand behind. And so I'm going to try to give you the story behind each one and why it impacted me or what I took away from it, because kind of had a realization. There's lots of books I read. Okay, let's say To Ride a Silver Broomstick. I read that book. I liked it, but there really wasn't a takeaway. You know, there really wasn't a takeaway that I'm still using today. I think the biggest takeaway from that book was she had a recipe for colds, which was basically like throw hot sauce on your face, like cayenne pepper, black pepper, and all that. I did that for a while when I was younger. Didn't always work. But witchcraft-wise, it was nothing wrong with the book. You know, it didn't really have a takeaway. So I tried to pick books that did have a takeaway. So the first books I obviously will promote are these two. This is one of the best books on initiatory craft out on the market right now that is written by an initiate, because very few are actually written by initiates right now. Stand behind this. I like it. Married the guy, you know, but it is groundbreaking. You know, it really is, in the sense that no other book had been written about witches working with the dead. So I love it when there's a hypothesis that's groundbreaking. And how I'd say Christian's book impacted me is, you know, that is a concept that I had to confront for myself and ask myself the question, how much? What do I feel about that? I do believe witches do work with the dead. I don't think it's our religion to work with the dead, but I definitely think it is a huge part of the history and interwoven practices. So that was great. So the narcissism over, however, we're going to go on to some other books. So I've got mostly witchcraft books because that was a subject, but I had to go with some non-witchcraft books as well, or books that really influenced me. So I'm going to give you a fun one right now. This book, Magic and Witchcraft by Catherine Paulson. I can't say that I recommend this book, but it's the first book on witchcraft that I bought when I was 13 years old. So it did impact me. And it's got some, you know, it's mostly just correspondences and things like that, but it's got really graphic and gory things and some dark things in there. So, 13 years old, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was really interested in it, but it also freaked me out. And so I, one point, got scared that I was working with the devil because I was trying to do things out of it. And me and my friend Michael did rituals like burning fire in a coffee can and dancing around it with broomsticks. 13 years old, 13, 14, throwing herbs in it. Didn't know what the herbs were, just witches throwing herbs in a fire. Magically, however, I think there was some sort of contact going on, but I buried this, or I had a floorboard that I hid it under forever because I was terrified my parents would find out about it and think I was a Satan worshipper. And I was also afraid I might be a Satan worshipper. So it did impact me. It's not a good craft book in the sense that it teaches witchcraft. It's folk magic mostly, and it's got a lot of gore in it, but there is a lot of folklore in it, so I had to pay it homage because it was the first book I ever bought on witchcraft. So this book, Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, also called by some people the Big Blue, or sometimes the Big Blue Abomination, depending on who you are. This book really introduced me, I think I was about 15 years old. It introduced me to the religion of witchcraft. I had never had the concept that witchcraft was a religion, and I didn't know anything about the goddess or people worshipping goddesses. And in my 15-year-old brain, the goddess was the epiphany and the takeaway that this book gave me. This book gets a lot of flack, but it's actually the best-selling witchcraft book in our company. My book was number 2. So Uncle Bucky is still beating my book. Damn you, Uncle Bucky. My book was number 2. His was still number 1. It is a very, very good book. And yes, it's not advanced, seemingly, but it's clearly not meant to be advanced. And he was trying, like all of us, to navigate what this was without breaking his oaths. And I don't like a lot of Raymond Buckland's books, but I must say, if you actually did everything in this book and put your heart into it, it really has a lot of material. I think the rituals are atrocious. They're atrocious. There's some good poetry and things like that in there, but to the Sabbath. But my takeaway from this book was the goddess and the god, but the goddess, really. So I think that that's still a very good book to recommend to anyone who's wanting to know about witchcraft today. And I love the fact that it's the complete book of witchcraft. Yeah. So that was very influential. So what's next here? Oh, let's have a fun one. Now, when I was younger, there was a used bookstore in my hometown that had a huge occult section. And they were all used. So I found a lot of books I still have today, and this was one of them. And this is how it was, no cover, Sybil Leek's Diary of the Witch. And this is my original hardback version. I loved reading this book. I ate it up. I think I was probably 16, 17 maybe, I don't know. Takeaways, I don't believe in it. I loved the mythology that she presented, but very quickly at an early age, she's got another book on witchcraft that had all the Gardnerian tools and Gardnerian things in there that I was aware of by then. So her story didn't add up to me. Could she have had magical people in her family? Sure, maybe. But I think the soup was colored quite a lot. But I really enjoyed the book, and it inspired me. And she did approach witchcraft as a religion, which I think is important. And she did sort of promote the current ideas of things. Most of her books are occult-oriented and magical-oriented, because that's what she was really about, right? So, but it wasn't really the narrative that was going on anymore. So, there is that. Probably not a huge surprise. This is from the same used bookstore. So I just ran into this. I wasn't seeking it out. So when I used to go into that bookstore, I don't even know what it's called now. You just were hunting for anything. I found so many good books there. This is the first edition. Before it was re-edited. It was re-edited by the Ferrars, who own the rights to it. it was a collaboration between the Farrars and the Sanders, but the Farrars sort of reneged, I suppose, on their end of things. So in the current editions you buy now, Maxine's actually been written out of the book. But this is the original. Maxine is there on the cover. And it's got a beautiful, I almost wish I was doing something like this. It's got a beautiful little secret on the inside. They don't do that with books very much anymore. But this was my first exposure to Alexandrian witchcraft. And once again, I was probably somewhere around 17 years old, I'm guessing. Didn't know who Maxine was. This is my first introduction to her right there, you know, and I'm very honored to be Alexandrian now. I'm reading this. I would have never thought someday you're not only going to meet her, but you're going to be Alexandrian and you're going to work in a circle with her. You know, wouldn't have thought in a million years, even years later, that was going to happen. You know, it seemed like really magical people from a time long gone by that I'd never get the opportunity to do that. But very influential book to me. Probably part of the reason I'm Alexandrian today, because I carried it with me. And I did all the rituals and things in this book that what was in there, and really ate it up and fell in love with the Sanders through this book. The Farrars don't shine through in this book. He was just writing it, almost kind of like a ghostwriter for Alex. It doesn't really have anything to do with the Farrars. So, other than he was the author. Great book. Great book. And so many takeaways from me, that one. If you can get the original edition, get that one. Because it's not the same now. Ego, right? Who changes a classic book like that? I'm not trying to talk smack about people. It just comes out, right? To follow that up, King of the Witches, which I got at the same used bookstore. This one didn't have a cover. It's, written by June Johns. This is where Alex's grandmother's story was introduced to most people. Though I do believe it may have been on an interview beforehand. I'm not sure about that. Alex comes through in this book. Probably more than any other book, I think, in some ways. Yes. Iconic book, And, well, I'm Alexandrian now, so I guess it did impact me, right? I'm going to try to go through questions at the end because otherwise I'm going to miss a bunch of them, I think. Okay. So, save that one for last. I ordered these. This is the first one I actually read, The Meaning of Witchcraft. I ordered it. And I was a bit older then, I think 17, 18 maybe. This came much later that I got this copy, and I have the meaning in this one as well. How can you not? These are the first two books written about witchcraft by a witch in the world. Ancient world may have had books like that, but they're gone now. So this is it. Meaning was very impactful. I was peering through time, and originally I did want to be Gardnerian because it seemed like that's the original. Obviously I have different thoughts about that now. This guy was obviously, and I think he'd be very proud of the Alexandrian tradition today. But yeah, iconic books. You can't be a witch and not read Gerald Gardner's books. Obviously, he had other books too. High Magic's Aid was very impactful for me in a way. I don't have my copy. It disappeared. I have a copy I don't like. So I had a really nice white copy that had all the rituals in the back of the book. And it just disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. So there's that. The takeaway. This is an odd one for some of you. This is called West Country Wicca. You won't see me hold up so many books with the Wicca word. A Journal of the Old Religion. I don't know how she pronounces it, but I'm going to assume it's Wicca. This book really impacted me because it's got another fanciful story. She claims that she encountered a community in the West Country of England, which is steeped in witchcraft lore, and that she learned witchcraft in this community, a farming community. Maybe there's a grain of truth in it, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe in the whole thing, but what I can tell you is that it's got some curious information that even initiates would find curious. And, doesn't really call it witchy in the book, But I think it was Ronald Hutton has done some work researching the magic in this book, and he claims that the herbs and recipes that she has in this book are authentic to the area, which could just make her a good researcher. Now, she wrote some other books that are really not that good. I don't know, but I recommend it as a read, even if it's just to inspire you. There's some curiosities here, like only 5 Sabbats, only 2 initiations, other things. So it's interesting. My aunt on my mother's side married a gentleman from Ireland who claimed to have come from an American community that was similar. And he had some really interesting stories. And what made me sort of believe it was the fact that he had no interest. He was an apple farmer. And when my aunt found out that I was getting into witchcraft around 17 or whatever, she was going on about how she was concerned. My favorite nephew's getting into witchcraft, and I'm really concerned about this. And he said, leave him alone. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing. You leave him alone. And he was very weird about it. And eventually she ended up pressing him for information about it. And he claimed that he had some very interesting memories of walking through fields naked with his parents during a full moon, that his grandmother used to call him her little witch, that his uncle removed warts, and there was a ritual that he remembers that is in this book, a harvest ritual, and he did remember it, because when he started telling me things, I asked him to look over this book. He had no occult interest. This was a private family conversation. He never shared this. In fact, he said when his parents moved away, it then became taboo to even speak of it. So it was really a family secret that was not really embraced by his parents after they moved away from the community. I don't know. I sort of believed him only because he had no motivation, unless he was just trying to impress me. And it didn't seem like that. This was a farmer boy. He was not interested in doing anything like that. Though he did want to know how I managed to make some of his apple trees bear fruit earlier than they should. So there is that. Okay, moving on. I thought I had to really... How can you not? Same used bookstore. This is my copy of Mastering Witchcraft, which was my dirty little secret back in the past, because I thought, it's spooky, right? It's got some spooky stuff in there. To think about it. Why do we all like this book so much? It represents witchcraft as a religion. It does give you the god and the goddess. It gives you some of the working tools. It gives you sort of a non-Gerald Gardner sort of feeling, even though there's a lot of it that is Gardnerian, obviously. My takeaway, other than I think it's an awesome book that really inspired me, was The Witch's Pyramid. It's about the only thing I really ever used out of this book. I still like it. Still one of my favorite books, but didn't really impact my craft. I think it's awesome. I would love to meet Paul Hewson. I'd love to have him at Hex Fest. He was gorgeous when he was younger. So attractive. I'd like to ask him questions. I'd like to know where his witchcraft came from. But, it definitely has some Gardnerian Alexandrian ties in it. A lot of things that they're doing in there are from us. But then there's other stuff too, Could have just been made up. I don't know. But that was the thing I took away from it. I don't have a copy, and Christian, I don't know where it is, but we don't have a copy of The Witch Cult of Western Europe. I have my original God of the Witches. Don't know what happened to the other one. Hugely influential, not only to me, but to witchcraft itself. Margaret Murray was an anthropologist who had a hypothesis that witchcraft may have actually had pagan roots. And if she would have stuck to that hypothesis, it would still be very valuable today. But she went off the deep end into certain few areas. And, she was a woman in the 1930s saying witchcraft was a religion. Like white male Christian contemporary peers who probably didn't think women should be anthropologists, because she was a renowned Egyptologist, by the way. Renowned for that work. She probably wasn't well received just by being a woman, but then going and saying witchcraft was a religion in a Christian society was a double whammy. I do think there are some flaws in her work, like her Joan of Arc bit. But I think the original hypothesis is very good. I think where she's wrong is that I think it was the mystery cults function more like that, whereas general paganism doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sorcery. Somebody coined the phrase that witches were pagan magicians, which I don't like the word pagan, but that is more accurate. Where she's basically approaching it as paganism and doesn't quite get into the nitty-gritty of that. But there's a lot in her books that are actually accurate history. Like, she is pulling up real history. It's not like a fantasy that she wrote. Some of her theories are flawed. Doesn't mean that everything in the book's flawed. In fact, a large section of it is not. And it definitely influenced the elders of the craft, who had all read it, right? So there is that. Here's another ditty from the past, and this is my first copy. I have a couple other ones. Aradia, Gospel of the Witches by Charles Leland. This book is hugely influential in the craft, and it is a work of folklore. I think that's what's often forgotten. It's not a work of history. People try to make it out like he was trying to prove the witchcraft hypothesis, or that he was trying to say it was history, or that he was a witch. None of these things are actually true. He was never a proclaimed witch or occultist. He was a folklorist who lived during the era of the Civil War. He was an American. He didn't make a bunch of money off this book. That's not even how he made his money. He was a folklorist. If you know anything about folklore or folklore societies, it's usually a work of passion and curiosity. You don't make a lot of money off of it. However, I believe that this work is authentic. Not only authentic folklore, but I think it has authentic information in here. And as an occultist, I recognize the fact that some of the information here has had a powerful and potent impact on the world today. And that's manifestation of results. So, huge fan of this sacred text. Last Alexandrian book that I'm going to promote today. This actually I read later, because I didn't, she hadn't written it when I was younger, but it was wonderful to read Maxine's experiences, more wonderful to having met her and established a kinship with her has been one of the biggest honors and privilege in my life as a witch. But I certainly enjoyed reading her Memoirs of Magic. Great book for anyone interested in the history of witchcraft and the Alexandrian tradition. Here's one people aren't going to expect. Or maybe they will. Laurie Cabot's book, Power of the Witch. Now, I'm not a Cabot witch, nor have I ever taken any of the Cabot classes. I am friends with Laurie Cabot. I love Laurie Cabot. I admire the Cabot tradition. It's not exactly the witchcraft that I practice, but she does promote it as a religion, which I like. She promotes it as ethical, and her magic is very hermetic, which is an Alexandrian. I can relate to that side of things. And she really tries to give the mechanics to people, and she really presents it in a very positive light and has done a lot to promote witchcraft in a positive light. She doesn't throw us under the Wicca pagan bus. I like that as well. And her priesthood has become a force unto itself. My biggest takeaway from this book was the Crystal Countdown, which is a hermetic technique to shift your consciousness, which is extremely effective and does work. So, there is that. Covenants by Patricia Crowther. I love me some Hateful Grandma. Patricia's got lots of books that I like, and there are a lot of books here I'm not going to be promoting because obviously there are so many. But this book impacted me because it answered a lot of questions I had at the time when I read it, because it's brilliantly written in the fact that it's like her answering questions, right? And she gives you some ritual structure techniques. It really did impact my craft for a long time. Some of the things in this book, some of the answers to the questions, you know. And she's the second prettiest old school witch next to Maxine. Blonde bombshells. Okay, so now for my favorite book on modern witchcraft. I have to say my favorite book of all times on modern witchcraft, the most impactful to me personally. Doreen Valiente's Witchcraft for Tomorrow. I love this book. And in fact, it inspired me in my own writing. In the back of her book, she has a little book of shadows that she had written for the book, which is what inspired me to do so for Initiation to Witchcraft. Not only is this book informative on so many things in British traditional witchcraft, but it has some real magical applications as well. And the dedication in this book, not self-initiation, people, dedication, is pretty good. And it's the one that I did before I was initiated. Though even then, I think I had the consciousness to realize that I still wanted to be initiated, and I was kind of doing what I could at the time to get the ball rolling. And I think it worked. So, fantastic book. I recommend all of those books, and those are the books that I've picked on the subject of witchcraft that I suggest to you. That actually all those books impacted me. There are so many books that I read, like Broomstick, that I liked it, but it didn't impact me. Perfect example, Thorne Mooney's book, Traditional Witcher, right? It's almost as good as mine. She's Gardnerian. They're almost as good as we are. But I'm sure she found it same as I did, right? When she read my book, she probably didn't learn anything from it, really. She liked my book. But when you don't take away from something, it doesn't change your practice, then, you know, there wasn't anything in here I didn't already know. Still really liked it and promote this book. I think it's an awesome book, and it's one of the few books put out right now by an initiate. She knows her stuff. She is coming from a Long Island Gardnerian perspective, just like I'm coming from a Temple of the Mother Alexandrian perspective. But for the most part, we agree. You know, she's a bit nicer than I am, or so it seems. So honorable mention there. Now, for the non-witchcraft books, including my current favorites. This isn't the right one. Key of Solomon. This is the new one, which I do like, by Stephen Skinner and David Rankin. However, Mather's version is the one that actually impacted me and is the best one. Can't find it all of a sudden. That book disappears from me all the time. I know it's here. It's done this before. It disappears from me all the time. The takeaway from that book, other than it being a foundational book for the occult and witchcraft in a way, was the planetary system. I use those planetary colors, those planetary metals today. So the actual works within the Key of Solomon, not so much. I've experimented with versions of the Pentacles and the Pentacles themselves with some success. But I'm not a Solomonic magician. You know, I am an occultist, you know, and a witch. So I use what works And as witchcraft is a scavenger religion, take what I need. So it's been useful, but those are the color systems, I think. And in our coven in New Orleans, that's the color system we use so that we have a cohesion. So, not going to do that one yet. Ooh, let's do some of these. So this is going to be one people make fun of me for, probably. DJ Conway's Celtic Magic. So I was very young when I read this book, but I really liked it, and I still like it. It's one of those little Llewellyn, Llewellyn was churning them out, and I think she was Gardnerian. I feel like I heard DJ Conway was Gardnerian, but I don't really know. It's a good little book. There's a lot of information in this little book if you're interested in Celtic magic, which is what it's promoting. It's not a history book. It gives you a breakdown of some of the gods and the goddesses, and it gives you some ways you can work magic. I thought it was a really good book, and it started me down my Celtic journey, because I think a lot of people think of me as the Egyptian guy now, but I started out my craft in, not going to date myself, but I think in the 80s and the 90s, everyone was very Celtic. And I was very Celtic-centric, and as far as I was concerned, witchcraft was Celtic. I no longer believe that, but at that time, that's what I believed very strongly. So, there you go. So, there's that. Getting a little more advanced on my Celtic studies. This wasn't the original version that I read, and in fact, I borrowed my original version that I read, but this is my current favorite. And it's the Mabinogion, or the Mabinogi, if you pronounce it correctly in the Welsh. I think I'm getting that right, Val, from your class. This has got all the fundamental Welsh stories that have influenced anyone who is practicing Celtic reconstruction or using Celtic mythos to inspire their witchcraft. This has got all the sacred stories, and this is one of my favorite editions. So... The White Goddess by Robert Graves. Absolutely a classic. It's really inspired by the Golden Bow quite a lot, which I don't have a copy of here, I don't think. Constantly think, I don't have it, and then there it is. This book really inspired me. Inspired me to research the Ogham more. It inspired me in its poetry. I get it's somewhat attacked a little bit now, but we progress. Great book. Fantastic. My love of the goddess. This book is absolutely an essential Bible for anyone who wants to practice Celtic magic. This is the best book. The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by W.I. Evan Wintz. It's just jam-packed with not only the history, but the current living tradition of the fairy faith, which in my opinion now, Celtic religion and the fairy faith are one and the same, and there are mythoses that support this fact. Fairies, by any other name, exist in every culture. It's no different than Christianity having God and the angels and the demons. It's the same idea. There's a hierarchy. And in the Celtic world, there was a hierarchy. The king and the queen of fairies are gods and goddesses. And more to that to come. But this is a great, great book. Fantastic. Getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune. Okay. So, I have a lot to say about this book. Number one, I love me some Dion Fortune. I love all of her books, and certainly her poetry has affected me. In her poetry, I really love. Her poetry draws me in. Her occult knowledge is astounding. However, an entertaining writer in the academic sense, she is not. I have read this book cover to cover twice, and it's like eating glass. But I have so many takeaways from this book. This is the only book on protection, magic, and defense that you actually ever need to read. Everything I do as a witch and an occultist pretty much comes from here. It is not craft, and of course there are witchcraft things, that we're taught, but really this woman really knew what she's doing, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, etc., etc., etc. There are so many things, and in fact I still encounter people who are having experiences that are written about in this book that are like they came from her, but they don't know that because not many people read this book really. This is the only book, this is written by an educated, intelligent person, and it comes across that way, and she's British, so it comes across extra dry, and she's a woman, so she had something to prove, which made it even more extra dry. So it's not entertaining, but if you can get through that, it's impacting. So there's about 5 practices and about maybe 15 pieces of knowledge in this book that are used by me in the present day, which is way more than I can say for most books I read. Because sometimes the takeaway is just one, like Hewson's The Witch's Pyramid. I really only had, loved the book, but found the god and the goddess beforehand, found Spooky and Satan beforehand, knew about Crossroads already. But that was the introduction to The Witch's Pyramid for me. This book had other introductions. And actually, Doreen uses stuff from her. Like, a lot of the elders use stuff from her. But it's really the only... If somebody asked me for a protection magic book, it's the only book I'd really come to mind to recommend. It's so good. But entertaining it is not. It's not. It's not an easy read. I wanted to throw in something completely out of the loop, and this book just jumped off the shelf for me. So I'm going to give a big shout out to Mr. Paul Barrell. And the reason why is because this is the only herbal book you'll ever need. I've read a lot of herbal books. I have, it's funny because when we talk about herbs now, I always say it's not really a big part of my magic. Doesn't mean I haven't explored it. It doesn't mean I didn't go down the path and try to figure that out. I now use herbs primarily in incense, as an ingredient to certain magical things, waters, etc., etc. In my home, I used to work with living plants quite a lot because we had all the Ogham trees. And I really loved working with the Ogham trees. They do not grow here in New Orleans. So my in-person plant relationship just doesn't exist here. In fact, my in-person nature relationship doesn't exist here, which I have come to discover is sort of something that I'm missing for myself. Planning on pursuing that a bit more. I used to work almost exclusively outside for years. And, I had access to, I knew where I could go get some willow or where I could go to the birch tree and leave an offering or get the paper for a spell, but Paul Barrell, really a bit embarrassed because he came to Hexfest one year and I was excited to meet him and I didn't think he was on the boat, so I almost missed announcing him. But he's an amazing man, an amazing herbalist, and in fact one of our coven members, Ellie Barnes, has gone to study with him to some extent. And we have members of the coven they actually grow herbs, do things, Our lovely High Priestess Christine Stevens likes to make nightshade wine, which I have drank now, unwittingly. But there is that. So, one more book that I have to point out that's going to completely be weird off the subject for people. Working Conjure by Hoodoo Sen Moise. Now, I'm pointing this book out because A, he's a friend of mine. B, I live in New Orleans, and I wanted to sort of support some of those things. But I also wrote one of the forewords in it. And, it is a Weiser book, so I got into Weiser to some extent. And it's one of the few Weiser books we actually sell, because I don't do business with them currently, because not simply because they did not publish my book, which was a huge business mistake on their end, but because their statements about not supporting basically initiatory traditions really bothered me. I'm like, you made your bread and butter for years off of these traditions and these orders, and now you're basically saying, all right, you can write whatever. The stuff they're publishing now look into it. You know, it's very strange stuff. It's being run by a Buddhist, you know, not to be petty. But this is a wiser book that's really good. The book really didn't impact me, but the person did who wrote it. You know, he's probably taught me most of what I know about Haitian voodoo and helped contribute to aligning me to the magic of New Orleans. So if you're interested in Haitian voodoo or you're interested in Southern conjure type things, it's a great book that I would recommend to you. And it's not my forte. To me, hoodoo and conjure are regional folk magic, just like any other regional folk magic. Doesn't mean they don't have grains of culture or religion woven in there. You go to Irish folk magic, it's usually got Catholicism woven in there, as well as the fairy faith. You know, it's like this weird mixture of the two. Same thing here in New Orleans. You're going to have those sorts of things. And I'm not speaking to that. But the magical side, it's folklore, right? Okay, so last book on my list. Oh, actually, I had two. I lied. Two. So I wanted to give you my current books. Like the books that are currently inspiring me or have currently inspired me the most. The first one is going to be this book. The Greek Magical Papyrus in Translation by Hans Dieter Betz, who I don't know anything about. But that spell book that you were looking for when you first got into magic, it's right here. So good I almost don't want to share it publicly, but this is the whole thing. This man didn't write it. This is a translation of Greek papyrus. The Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans wrote a lot down, unlike the Celts and the Saxons and the Norse. You know, we have massive amounts of spells and rituals that are documented that we still have access to today, which has basically inspired everything going on in the Western occult. We've got the folklore flavors, you know, that we get from the Celts and the Saxons and the Norse or whatever within our witchcraft regionally. But most of the mechanics and the real deep stuff, they wrote it all down. It's there. You know, all you've got to do is read it. More and more is still being translated because some things are not. There are some Gaelic texts that are still being translated, but till that happens, we don't really know what they are. So last but not least, Isis in the Greco-Roman world. This is also called Isis in the Ancient World. It's got two titles, same book. This book is not a magic book. This is an academic book. And it's the most impactful book on witchcraft that I have read in a really long time, because it's not about witchcraft. It's about a world cult of the goddess Isis. And it has so much historic information that was so very eye-opening. You know, having someone read it, you know, someone mentioned, like the Farrars mentioned, oh, Isis was once a world religion or whatever. You're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But actually getting the in-depth information of how vast and the comparison that we can see that there was a priesthood, there's a professor, and I'm going to mention his name in another work later, who did a talk, once again, not a religious talk, on mystery cults. And he made a statement in his talk, and I have posted on YouTube, because it is on YouTube. I posted it from YouTube, that witchcraft, modern witchcraft, I think he does say Wicca, but modern witchcraft resembles the cult of Isis. That they're basically one and the same. If you were to look at the cult of Isis, it really could have been called the cult of the goddess, which is what modern witchcraft is. The difference is we're coming through a lens that's really not pre-Christian. Like when you're coming through the lens of witchcraft and we're being inspired by Leland and Margaret Murray and witches that existed within the Christian context, which is what even the word witch is. We don't really have a context of the word witch being pre-Christian other than witcha, which people like to call Wicca now, which was the whole point of that word, is that Gerald Gardner introduced that word to say, this is the old pre-Christian witch. We don't really know if it was, though. We know it's the Old English version of the word witch, but Old English was not necessarily pre-Christian either. So, you know, parlay. However, mechanically, how we worship, the cult of Isis worshipped a god and a goddess, who were a moon goddess and a horned god. She's the goddess of magic. In the European version, the goddess of the moon. Like, she was equated with all these other goddesses. She was called the goddess of 10,000 names. Her cult, according to the Golden Bow, had 3 degrees of initiation. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. You basically could just blueprint it. However, one exists in a pre-Christian era, and another exists within Christianity. And, well, more to come on that. So I'm going to try to scroll back and see if I can find questions, because I've just been going on and on and on and on. I yacked for an hour, though, just on this book review. But yes, totally excited for Levi's book. We've got some working titles. I know it's going to be great. I do have an editor who's going to be working with us, Marta. Hope I'm saying her name right. Helped edit my book. So we've got a little bit of a machine. Christian's going to do the layout. He still wants to do that. Hi, I have a question. How good is your incense stick? Do they smell? I don't know what that means. If you mean our store incense, all of our store incense is good. You know, you can get that incense stick that's like, I used to call it grocery store incense that smells like some weird cheap perfume. We're definitely not that. We have different brands, though. Teresa Graham, I don't know which book you mean. If you mean my book, which I'm going to guess that you do, you can get it from Hex or Omen in both Salem and New Orleans. You can get it from hexwitch.com or omensalem.com. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Ingram or New Leaf. There are other occult stores that carry it. There are other bookstores that carry it on their websites. I don't know about it in their stores. I have no idea, honestly. But it's readily accessible. Now, the books that I'm talking about, the only one that's not available, I believe the only one of these that's not in print is Christian's book. So you people need to talk to him about that. Unless you want to pay hundreds of dollars on Amazon, his book is not available. I have a question for the book Initiation into Witchcraft. Does it focus on the craft itself outside of the Wiccan perspective? So Amanda, I don't really use the word Wiccan very much, and I pronounce it Wiccian, which is basically a plural. So what people call Wicca and what people call Wiccan means different things, just like what people call witch or witchcraft means different things. So there are loads of people who are using those words in different ways. As an initiate of the first introduction of the religion of witchcraft, we use the word that you would call Wicca as an old sacred word for witch, because historically speaking, it's just simply Old English. So Wiccan, which is really pronounced Witchian, is Old English for witches or witchcraft, and Wicca or Wicca, which is really pronounced Wicca or Witche, is really Old English for witch. So they're not different words. Now, what most people are trying to say when they try to make a difference between Gerald Gardner's religion of witchcraft and Wicca is they're trying to say that that's not just witchcraft, he created Wicca. However, loads of people are using the word Wicca or Wiccan who are not a part of Gardnerian or Alexandrian craft. So it's kind of a negotiation. So my book is focusing on the religion of witchcraft, which is an initiatory mystery cult that was introduced to the world by Gerald Gardner. However, I do focus a lot on folklore, pre-Christian folklore, and the pre-Christian mystery cults that I believe the current of witchcraft still retains today. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm excited for Covendom too. Teresa, I know that my book was on Barnes & Noble's website at one point in time. I don't know if it is now. Yes, Random House. Yes, thank you, Maura. Random House. We're very proud of Leanne and Sandra. And their book is very marketable, and it really goes into something they're doing. You know, they've been running the tea for years now. Very, very cool. Hello, David from the UK. Yes, I am writing a book. I started again. Oh, Christian needs to write his book. If you're asking about what books we have in print in Warlock Press, just mine. That's it. We started Warlock Press last year. My book was published in August. COVID-19 threw things for a loop. We don't have a huge corporate machine. We have Christian and myself, great store managers. We now have Kevin Wright, who is a corporate officer, basically, what his title is. And we've got some private contractors we work with who really help this machine work. But with a lot of extra stuff going on, we didn't really have the manpower. So we're just really getting back to Warlock Press. And I am the one who is actually overseeing new authors currently. I'm catching up with questions. I don't know if we'll keep an online option or not. It's possible for HexFest. I always have to remember to say the question, and I'm horrible about that. Don't have my co-host with me. Amy, yeah, some occultists had some peculiar ideas about that sort of thing, including racial karma, and I believe a lot of that comes from Blavatsky. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in racial karma. I don't believe that individual races have particular powers. So I diverge with her on that. I believe in reincarnation, so you could have been anything at any time. Amy was mentioning that Dion Fortune talks about racial karma and psychic abilities, and natural psychic abilities being racial. I don't believe that. I'm actually quite honestly, I'm fine with people being proud of their culture, and I can understand why people are so hungry for it now, particularly in America, because we really don't have much of one ourselves, right? It's why you get all the people saying Lord and Lady. That's not really a part of the craft, you know. Not in the UK. Would never. No one says Lord and Lady. Don't know who started that here, really. But it's because we don't really have lords and ladies, so it's, you know, whatever it's going to be. I think people really hunger for culture, and the problem is that when you mix religion and race, it's a very, very dangerous recipe. I don't think God sees race. You know, I think the world's had enough racial divides. I think be proud of your ancestry, be proud of your sacred stories, but our ancestors, all of our ancestors, would have loved other races embracing their beliefs. That is the reason their beliefs still exist. So this modern idea of keep it to yourself, that's really, really strange. I think it's very dangerous, and it reminds me a bit of Nazi Germany. And, you know, you do find that coming up, particularly in the Norse stuff, which being 25% Nordic, I, you know, find that quite sad. Because I don't think the Vikings cared what color of your skin was. They'd rape anyone. Still catching up with questions. Oh, I saw this question earlier. I didn't know if I knew what it meant. Michael's asking, what's your take upon the blazing star, also known as the inverted pentagram, goat of Mendez, within the formation of the witch's oath, creed, triangle, or cone of power within witchcraft? Well, your verbiage is familiar and alien to me. So, the upside-down pentagram is used in the craft. It does not mean the devil. We use upright and upside down all kinds of things. What you have is with certain groups like the Church of Satan or people who are trying to promote the satanic idea, they like to invert everything as a way to blaspheme it. The cross, the pentacle, it's all spooky. And most of that became popularized by rock stars, really. On record covers, right? Yes, we do. We do use sacred geometry in the craft, and it goes in all kinds of directions. I got a note saying, oh, you guys probably see that. Congratulations, you've received 100 messages from the Restream chat. By the way, what do you guys think of the blonde hair? Not dark and spooky anymore. I have to do a little eye makeup, though, where I look too beige. Because it's like I'm as white as my hair, other than the rosy cheeks. I'm aggressively white. I told Christian today, I said I had ginger genes. He's like, where? I'm like, you've never seen my natural hair color. I'm like, I've got freckles. I've had red in my hair before. I'm like, I'm not French. Christian's French, everyone. Explains a lot. French. I am mostly British, meaning Irish, Scottish, Welsh, British, with a little bit of Scandinavian, Swedish in me. I think it's Finland and Sweden, actually. Way back, I have a little Egyptian and a little Italian. Christian has a little pygmy. I did get a little bit of South Africa. And I really like that little book. I know it's just this little book, but if you really read it, it actually got some really good information. And I've verified a lot of that information through my years. Like her mythos and stuff is very... I don't know what's going on with DJ Conway now. I wasn't really a fan of her personally. Like, not a fan, but it's the only book, really. I know she's written other books. She was on my Facebook at one point in time. I don't know if she's still around. Never spoken to... I spoke to her before I became a person. It's funny how that changes things. Yes, I love... in fact, Christian, the Coven could probably go see him. We just weren't sure if you should come. Depends on if you're in a good boy mood. He's got like a compound where he teaches people herbology. Ellie's gone. I don't know if it's our cup of tea, but if you want to know about herbs, he knows his stuff. This is the second time that came up with. I have read Leo Martello's books. I'm not a fan. I don't hate him or anything. I'm just not a fan. Very early on, I acquired sort of what I think should be an obvious perception of the modern history of witchcraft. Who's not answering? I don't know. Anyway, Christian's sending me some kind of message. He's not answering. I don't know what that means. So, Leo Martello, I didn't buy any of his story. Didn't buy any of his, I don't think he was Strega. I don't think he was European Continental. I don't, just the entire Strega thing, I don't buy. I buy Leland. I buy Italian folklore. I buy all that. Authentic. I definitely buy into... I've been to Nemi, Italy. I could quite well see a current cult going on there, and I've got stories about it. sorry, these weird messages. I don't know what I'm trying to go through these messages and pay attention to what I'm doing. So it's not that I don't believe that things go bump in the night, but I think a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon of witchcraft way after the fact, and it becomes kind of suspicious. And then when you look at their stuff, they're really doing what we do with a little bit of verbiage change. And they're not doing, and if you're not initiated, what you don't realize is they're doing what we do wrong. So it becomes very clear. No, I don't buy into that. I mean, stragera can mean a magical person. It has implications to demons and vampires. Witch is an English word. And although we translate that into other cultures' magical people, they're not the same word. They don't necessarily denote the same thing. People that practice magic is as much as it translates, really. It's not necessarily the same thing. Because people can practice magic and be into some sort of cultural shamanism and be in a completely different religion and belief system. So that's all a part of British colonialism, which is something I'm not going to get too into right now. Same teacup. Oh, the Yeti? The Yeti? Christian got this for me. Sarah Beth is asking, how do you become a member of a coven? I'm in Massachusetts. Is that what MS stands for? Michigan? I don't know. Totally horrible on my American geography. So I'm basically neighbors to you all. Oh, Mississippi. Duh. All right. Neighbors to you all. No, I love learning about witchcraft occult. Sorry if you already covered this. I was too late to stream. No problem. Every coven's different. So in an initiatory coven, you have to be initiated into it. Some covens have outer courts. It's not how it originally was done, and I don't have one. So the Alexandrians had a process of doing soirees and meeting people. And it was building relationships. And you just used your psychic instinct, I guess, to ascertain that they smelled right, to become an initiate. And then you went ahead with it. That's how I practice. Some covens have an outer court they want you to be a part of for a while so that they can assess you out. Not saying that's wrong. I see the benefits in it. It's just not how I currently operate. To join a coven, you have to ask for initiation. In Alexandria and Gardner, and you have to ask the high priest and the high priestess for initiation. Other covens might have different requirements. That's basically it. Now, to become an initiate, generally speaking, you need to be in the geography of where that coven is, or be willing to travel to the meetings. Hopefully that answers your question. Ashley's asking, can you explain the difference between Alexandrian and Gardnerian? Beauty. Stealing Maxine's word there. Philosophy. So Alexandrian and Gardnerian witchcraft are different sects of the same religion. It's kind of like the I always try to use Catholicism, and I can always remember the Jesuits, and I can't. Franciscans and the Jesuits. Like there's different Catholic orders, like the Franciscans and the Jesuits. Different sects of philosophy within the same religion and priesthood. That's how I view the difference between Alexandrian and Gardnerian. Now that can get even further subdivided by lineages within those branches, but the main differences are philosophies, and you've got to explore those. It would be a long explanation for me to give all of those to you, but it's different philosophies, and so you've got to ask a lot of questions. For me, the reason Alexandrian resonates with me is because I like freedom, beauty, and power, as the philosophies that I embrace in Alexandrian craft, which equates to true equality. We don't castrate our priests. That's sort of a controversial thing to say. True equality, true individuality. You can be a member of our craft without necessarily being bound to it, and you can explore your own magics, and you can work the arts magical regardless of who you are or what level you are. That's based on my experiences, and it's different for, there are loads of variations between different Gardnerians and Alexandrians, but I think if you get really well-trained ones in their respective lineage, they're going to have an understanding of the philosophical differences that they have. But that's basically it. We all believe in the goddess and the god. We all believe in the arts magical. We all believe in the Book of Shadows. We all believe in initiation, etc., etc., etc. It's the same religion, the religion of witchcraft, that was introduced by the messenger of the gods, Gerald Gardner and Alexanders. My new book, all I want to say right now is I think it's complementary to initiation into witchcraft. That's all I'm going to say right now. It's too into the developmental stage for me to speak on it further. Am I cheeky? My hair's not quite white, but that is the goal. It's platinum. So, yeah, whiter it is, the better. In fact, when I was a young child, this was my natural hair color. It got darker as I got older. Me and my older brother and my father were all what you call towhead blondes. My younger brother had dark hair and dark eyes like my mother. But as I got older, my hair became honey, blonde, and red. Beautiful colors. But no, now I've got a bit of white in there. So if it even, but my hair hasn't seen the natural light of day since I was 15 and dyed it black. And my hair has always been extreme blonde or extreme black. I can't do reds because of all the pinks in my skin that come out. So thought I might try and make maybe a red brown. Maybe I could do that. It's just a little brown with a bit of red in it. Yeah, I know. I don't always read it. I'm trying to. This lady, I think it's a lady, sorry, says, I'm a Christian and recently come across your channel. Thanks for sharing with us. Does your religion have a worldview? Morality, church, and practice? Yes, we do. We do believe in freedom, and we believe that human nature is as God intended, so therefore we're not going to have a problem with people being gay or, as long as basically it comes down to what we like to try to put it down to people is that what's called the witch's reed or, the witch's reed or the witch's creed, which is, an it harm none, do what you will. This is a maximum. It's not really a law, but it's a philosophy that most witches embrace or should. And it basically means do what you want, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, as long as it's not causing harm. So we believe in living a life that does not cause harm to ourselves or others. But we believe that we inherently have God's message within us. And that whatever you're, wanting to do, love is definitely a part of our morality. We believe love is the most powerful force on earth. But we do believe we have an intimate connection with the gods. We do not believe that we have to have a go-between. Yeah. It's far too complicated to really answer that whole question, so I'm going to go to the basic one. Yes, we do. We have ethics. We have an afterlife philosophy. We believe in other worlds, and we believe in reincarnation. Oh, I do all my own hair. I've done my own hair for years. I even cut my own hair. No one else has touched my hair in God knows how long, because they always mess it up. It would take a good hairdresser to let me have a hairdresser again. I'm not saying they're not out there. Gothic Crypt. The only advice I can have to you about initiation really comes from the goddess. Let none stop you nor turn you aside. But it may require relocation or travel. If you wanted to become a doctor, you're going to have to go to medical school. That's just the way it is. In this case, you don't have to pay for the actual training, at least. Might have to train for the traveler moving, but you don't pay for it. What is your view of the Sith versus the... Oh, she versus Elven. Oh, well, I think they're the same thing. I think the she and the Elven are the same thing. She just means people of the mound, or people of the goddess Dana, depending on the interpretation you have. It is Irish, Celtic Gaelic. Elven's more Norse in terminology, though it does enter into the British. So it does have British roots. They're the same thing. Elven, I think, are probably more close to what we call the Shining Ones, which were more like, the Tuatha De Danann, unnamed gods, higher end. But it depends on what mythology you're coming from. But the she is a broad spectrum of lots of entities, including, up to and including the dead. Elven is a particular race among them. Oh, good question. And I should have mentioned this before. My favorite book on witchcraft is called The Book of Shadows. So, yes, we have a sacred text. It's called The Book of Shadows. And this is not the same as what witches call their Book of Shadows. A lot of people call their Book of Shadows today. So a lot of people in a lot of books say, write your Book of Shadows, which is basically saying write your own grimoire. Now, here's the whole thing. The Book of Shadows is the title of a grimoire, a sacred text or magical book. And it was Gardner's. So it'd be kind of like being like, hey, everyone, write your own magus. I know you don't have the real magus, but I'm writing a book for Llewellyn, and I'm going to tell you can write your own magus. That's what happened. That is what happened. And I understand that people don't want to walk away from these narratives, from the trashy, self-appointed American pagan elders, but that is what happened. Walk away. In Alexandrian craft, we call them magical journals, but you could call them grimoires. You can have your own book. But there is a sacred text. It's called the Book of Shadows. I also consider Leland's Gospel of the Witches to be a sacred text. I also consider the Mabinogi to be a sacred text. I also consider the Egyptian Book of the Dead to be a sacred text. So yes, there are many sacred texts that have been left to us by the ancestors and the various priesthoods in their incarnations. All of which are much. Go down that road. The last question I have on here is, what is your opinion on American Horror Story Coven? I found it extremely entertaining. What I found creepy about it was the knowledge of... We knew they were coming to New Orleans. And they always say life imitates art, right? Life imitates art. So... we knew the writers were researching for this thing that was going to be happening. Like, we were kind of told here. They were here. Like, they came to New Orleans, obviously. They used a house here. So we were well aware as locals. In fact, Fiona Good, can't think of the actress's name, think she's based on me. No, she's not. She should have been. But think it's the character I most resemble. She was here, the actress, can't think of her name. Lovely, fantastic. I mean, she made the whole thing, didn't she? But Is it authentic to witchcraft? No. But here's where it's interesting. There are so many authentic references. So they mention Anita Toops and Pomp's Fountain. Actually true. Anita Toops was the first person to open a witchcraft store in New Orleans, and one of the first people to open a witchcraft store in the United States. She was functioning in the 1970s, which was very early here. And she started the first church in the United States of witchcraft. It was called the Religious Order of Witchcraft, of which one of our coven members is a former high priestess of that organization. So there is a real, right there's a weird, creepy tie-in. Then they had a painting of one of the Supremes on the wall, and they called her Mimi. And she looks like one of the store owners here, whose name is Mimi. Just a little thing, just a painting. I'm going to give you guys all something you probably are going to go, wow. So, Misty Day, who had the power of necromancy. Misty Day, Christian Day. Misty Day, Christian Day. Misty Day, Christian Day. Let that just sink in. So the writers came here and they actually got local information and helped inspired write the story. Likewise, there have been some headbutts between the ATRs and my coven here at some point in time, maybe. But, not all of them. I've got my allies. I have my allies, and we've got coven member like Sin Elias, who owns Crescent City Conjure, and he really sells a lot of hoodoo and voodoo, or not voodoo, sorry, a lot of hoodoo and conjure projects, and he's an initiated witch as well, so very tapped into that aspect of the folklore of the local land, and he's passionate about it. He's embraced his West African history and ancestry, and we do that. That's okay. It's okay to be like, this is where I'm from, but it's where your flesh is from. And as witches, we believe we're from many other things, so that's like one little thing. That's like saying, I live in New Orleans now, so everything about me has to be New Orleans. No, it doesn't. I'm just here now, right now. Don't know if I'll even live here my whole life. I don't know if I see the connection, but I'll buy it. I don't know what that means. Thank you for asking. As a Christian, you asked good questions, and I appreciate that, but yes, we do. We have, from a witch's perspective, we worship the same God you do, and that's probably a big surprise, Isis, Osiris, Jesus, Mary, Horus, there's a lot of crossover in the history of humanity and these sacred stories. If you look at Jesus, before the state religion got involved, he was very witchcraft-like. He was a rebel. He was feared and scorned, adored by his followers, and he worked what would have seemed like magic. You would call them miracles. But healing the sick and, casting out demons and doing all these magical and miraculous things, walking on water. Not very different than what you might see stories in witchcraft of some of our icons performing the same sorts of magical acts. So, and he was persecuted and killed just like a witch. He wasn't burnt to the stake. He was nailed to one. But there you go. Of course, the state gets a hold of it, just like states have gotten a hold of... I made a comment on my Facebook page recently that said, I think that all gods of the people were gods of witchcraft. And my thought there was, before states get a hold... there were cultures that were different. But for usually now, and in most of our modern history, once the state machine got a hold of it, and once it was a governmentally controlled thing, they would take these gods and twist them into something else. I think that's what's happened with the God of the Christians. I think that's what happened to Jesus. I think he's been twisted. Don't think he'd be very keen on it at all. I think he'd be knocking over a lot of apple carts. But no, witches are not inherently anti-Christian. We are anti-establishment, perhaps, because most modern establishments suck. Freedom is important in the craft. Extremely important. All right, so I don't seem to have any further questions. So last shot on questions. So if you have a question to keep me going, if you want to keep me going, you've got to ask a question. I'm going to sort of give a brief summary of what is going on once again. Community service. The work. Yes. I mean, wouldn't call it that necessarily. It's very individual. You know, people tend to come to witches often as a last resort. They do come. You know, I remember a knock at my front door here in New Orleans with a woman who wanted to show me photographs of her granddaughter who had been beaten and had broken bones, and she wanted to know if she was being abused. And she had a genuine question. She wasn't. She just knew we were spiritual people. That's what they say. Spiritual people. They do come asking, and it depends on who you are and how you interact with the community or whatever your community is. I wouldn't call it community service because we don't owe it to anyone, nor are we trying to earn some kind of brownie points. Witches generally don't work in the open. So the things that we're doing are either subversive, behind the scenes. Obviously, public witches like myself, there's the education aspect, the empowering aspect. But my magic, it's not really done publicly. So the people I work magic with or for, it's behind the scenes. But the work, there is something we say in the craft and in the occult, the great work. There's that. Thank you. So I'm very excited about Warlock Press. And if you are a potential author that would like to have a book published, you need to submit to the correct form. It is, and if it's not in that form, don't message it to Christian, don't send it in an email. It needs to be on that form, and it is, you just go to warlockspress.com, and it's right there. You submit it on there. I'm overlooking the files. I am looking for a couple more projects. If we select you, we will be behind you. That means we'll be invested in you. You will have presentation at Hex Fest. You'll have presentation at our events above anyone else. You'll have great marketing in our stores. You'll have great marketing online. You will be a part of our legacy as long as it continues. Kenneth, I wouldn't consider myself a tarot teacher, though I have practiced. Thank you, Christian. Warlockspress.com, yeah. I have practiced tarot for a really long time. Oh, wish I would have been prepared for this question because I can't think of the deck right now. I love this deck, but this is a precursor to the tarot deck. It says it's tarot, but it's not. It's not really a tarot deck. I can't think of the name of the original tarot deck right now. It's Italian, I believe. I believe that the original tarot deck was written as a Catholic moral story. However, like many sets of cards, it has an older voice, and it's been developed by occultism, and it's become a thing unto itself. You are talking about archetypes, and Paul Hewson, another great book, The Devil's Picture Book, just happened to be sitting right next to me. You're working with archetypes, and there is now an occult current surrounding these things. But I do think it started out from old, like I think this is a pre-Christian. This is all Greco-Roman gods. This is a precursor to the tarot deck. It's not a tarot deck, even though it says tarot on it. This is a recreation of written descriptions, because we don't have a physical copy of this tarot deck anymore, but it's 4 bird suits, which denotes the winds, perhaps. And it's the phoenix, the eagle, the turtle dove, and the dove. Those are the 4 suits, and then you have the Greco-Roman gods. It's a good deck. But I think somewhere along the line it's developed, and these cards, and the art of divining through these playing cards goes back a bit. We've got it in my Swedish grandmother, read playing cards, like standard playing cards. She was proficient at it. She read them daily. So these things happen. But I'm not a master tarot deck. I think the most influential group to the modern practice of esoteric tarot is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I think they really stamped that. And I think most of what everyone's doing is from them. In fact, the wider weight deck, he was a member of the Golden Dawn. There you go. So it's a revisiting of the Catholic moral story, and they've occultified it a little bit more. And then, Aleister Crowley went even further with the Thoth, or Thoth deck, however you want to pronounce it. I say Thoth. I think they say Thoth. Have any movies influenced my path? No, not really. There's movies I like, that have inspired me magically, I suppose. No, none of them have influenced my path. No. I think that the superficial books influenced me. Now, the imagination influenced me. As a child, I was, regardless of my... Yes, I love all those the movies, but I wouldn't say they influenced my path. There's tons of movies I love, but influenced would be a strong word. I don't think any movie or TV show has actually influenced what I do. I do think that magic, being introduced to me as a child in fairy tales, mythologies, movies, games, that influenced me psychologically, because it resonated with me. Because it resonates with certain individuals just like other things do. Some people, mathematics resonates with them. That's their inner genius. Magic only resonates with some individuals. And so in that sense, I think, inspired, made me feel witchy, sure. But actually impacted my practice? No. Do I think it impacts people's perceptions in the world? Yes. It does, because movies and TV are a part of our current mythology. But what we have to remember is it's not real. However, some of it is based on real. Hence, American Horror Covenant, it's not real, but there were elements of it that came from reality. Life imitates art, they say. That happens. Some of these movies and things like that have real elements of the occult, real truths in them, and occultists love when they see them. But it's not, nothing about what I do came from a movie or cartoon or TV show. Karen, you don't have a question for me? Come on, throw one out. Entertain the kids. I did like practical magic, but no, it didn't influence me. Other than I want an old Victorian house if I ever move out of New Orleans. Oh, we're on social media all the time. I don't know how you haven't seen us. We're on all the time. I'm drinking my juice, Shelby. Oh, I love Bewitched. Yeah. Yeah, of course I do. Witch's Honor. Yeah. I think we did used to do that, didn't we, Karen, when we were younger? Witch's Honor. Witch's Honor. Not seriously. It's in good fun. Isn't the Vasigo thing from, like, Ghostbusters? Or am I thinking of something else? Covenant's coming back in June. Levi and I have already agreed, so it'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be going into our studio and exposing each other to our germs. It's just the two of us. We'll be fine. So I might get new earbuds, because I don't know who's been touching them down there in that store. I don't know. Coffee. I'm a huge... I do love wine, but I'm actually a huge coffee drinker. Water. Primarily, though Christian introduced me to these Mio things that you squirt in the water, and I drink a lot of coffee. I drink tea sometimes, but mostly in the evening. I like mint tea, chamomile tea before bed. But I'm not a tea I don't drink like caffeinated tea. The last time I had caffeinated tea was when I was in my teacher's house in Britain, and British tea is crack. Because I remember like that stuff's caffeinated. Yeah. Yes, coming back. We were practicing social distancing, and because we do that in the stores, we put a hold on it. So this is the cartouche, I think I'm saying that right, that I had made when I was in Egypt. So on this side it has symbols of Isis, the Ankh, and the scarab. And on this side it has my name in hieroglyphs. One of my names. I've had Red Singer before. Yes, very good. Yeah, I drink... my mother did the same thing. My mother used to drink coffee till she went to bed. The Egyptian book again. Oh, do you mean... it's actually Greek. Do you mean this one? It's Greek. The Greek Magical Papyra in translation. Is this the one you meant? What you have to remember is that the Greek world introduced the world to Egypt, and then the Roman world took it there. Because the thing about the Romans, and I actually learned this was in Italy from Italians in Rome, that the Romans actually are attributed for inventing a lot of things they didn't invent. Like a lot of people say the Romans invented roads. They didn't. In fact, actually the Celts were more known for roads. What the Romans did is they made it better. They made roads better. The Romans would like take something and then make it better. So same thing. The Greeks introduced Egypt's mysteries to the, kind of put it out there along the Mediterranean and in certain places and put it into the mysteries. But the Romans brought it to, the Romans brought Isis to England. Okay? She had temples there for a long time. Probably more than we know. Because we only know of two, loosely. There's so much we don't know. They lived there for 400 years, guys. And when they left, people weren't happy about it. Not in the civilized world, anyway. I'm sure out there in Wales, Val, they were, yeah. But that's not the civilized world. I've been there. It's still not. Oh, sorry. There's so many pages. Oh, Leanne. My sister from another brother, or my sister from another mother. I don't know. I love Leanne. Congratulations on your book. Reading the leaves, fantastic. We were talking about that earlier. Super awesome. We also talked about your people, the Italians. Although Leanne is also a bit leprechaun like me. Like, I'm 1% Italian. Could be Greek, but I'm betting it's Italian since, you know, the whole British thing. Grace, Christian and I have a concept book that could happen someday. I will say, this is what I will say. Lately, for some reason, like, I'm going through a different experience, but that aside, God lives in Egypt. There are so many experiences that I had in Egypt. So many experiences. But I also had great experiences in Italy. Different, but great. And Greece and the UK. But as far as, like, this, like, thing, there is a voice, an undercurrent in Egypt that is just, it's there the whole time, and nobody there knows it's there, but it's there. I can't quite explain it. There's a video game I play that would make sense, but it wouldn't make sense to any of you guys. A shadowy, it's there. It's there. There are certain places when it's there. It is very much there. But then there's the current spiritual regime, which is really not connected to it. What I have found as an initiate, when I go to these ancient places that once had initiates, the gods really, really come through and recognize you. And they want you to stay. You know, that's the power. The land itself wants you to stay. Almost like you feel like you should save it. You know, I've wanted to move to every place I've gone. But it was fantastic. It was fantastic. Egypt was fantastic. The island of Philae was one of the most magical places I've ever been. But there were other things. We went into a museum. Christian's going to love me saying this. And we were brought into the mummies of the kings. There was a vortex of power there. Extreme power. I don't know if it's the belief that the bodies had become like talismans. They were god kings. I don't know. Gods themselves. I don't know. But the power in that room was ever present. And I'm not obsessed with the dead. Doesn't mean I don't recognize it. I'm just not obsessed with it. And energy persists, absolutely. Though I have to say, like, I've been Egypt crazy for a long time, and I'm certainly devoted to the idea of Isis. But lately I've been, Karen, getting back into, like, the whole, like, UK fairy thing. It's just come up. It's come up. I'm missing nature. I think maybe it's, I don't know what it is. It's a thing. Now, when you're in Egypt, Isis is a part of nature. Because, you know, I made a comment to the Coven recently. I said, you don't picture Isis in a forest. You know, because you don't. Goddess Isis sitting in a forest with a circle of people. But in Egypt, she is very much a part of nature. Because then it's the Nile and it's the plants and the things that make sense there. And I slept on the Nile for days. It's fantastic. I drank Nile water. I played with cobras from a distance. Yes. I do miss home for that reason, because it's so much like the UK. Including brutal winters that I don't miss. The reason why so many occult orders are focused on Egypt is because they wrote a lot down. And it influenced the Greeks, and it influenced the Romans. And it's a conduit to the cradle of civilization and all religion. So Christianity is influenced by the Egyptians. There is no part of the world that is not influenced by the Egyptians. It is really cradle of civilization. We don't get a lot from the Babylonian side of that crescent of civilization because of the current regimes that are there and the lack of attention, I think. And the West, Egypt was once owned by the British Empire. So there you have it. Half of it's in the British Museum. Yeah. Wicked Witch. Do you watch Ghost Hunters? There was an episode where they might have dealt with some fairies. Oh, I'll speak foul language. I haven't seen it. Those people didn't deal with any fairies. Not anti-Ghost Hunters, but deal with... Maybe they met... I don't know. I haven't seen it, no. I have not. I think... Is it Zach's his name? I think he's cute. That's about all I have. That's the only opinion I really have. I was almost on it once, but British Airways screwed that up. No, nature is very, it's just here. I'm very much a city witch because we're surrounded by swamps. Yeah, you don't want to fuck with fairies. You don't want to fuck with spirits. And fairies are spirits. Some of them are human. Were. Some of them never were. Fairies, or she, like the Geddy, or any other thing you might say spirits, it's a big umbrella term. People of the mound. Well, there's legends that say they were dead in the mounds when the gods came. They were dead in the mounds after the gods came. And there's legends that say the gods went into the mounds, and all the spirits went into the mounds. So it's... What you really have is this sort of sacred unknowing windows to the other world. I think that in my mythology, there's this world and there's the next. And there's this... Think about all the living things in this world. Got people, diverse races, plants, animals, insects. All these vital living organisms. Turn all those into spirits. They're going to be diverse too. So, you don't think insects have souls? You don't think plants have souls? Everything has a soul. On the other side, the other mirror, because I prefer mirror. I think it's... The Druids or the Celts believed that when you died in this world, you went to the next. And then you could die in that one again. And then you come back here. And it was like a ping pong. Makes just as much sense as anything else, really, doesn't it? I think the other world is as diverse as this one. I put kefi recipes in my book. In fact, we have burned kefi ourselves. There's different recipes. I think I put a couple different papyrus recipes in my book. And although I have not made it, I have burned incense made by... I've burned kefi made by Alexandrians. I've been gifted kefi by Alexandrians, who are very good incense makers. Wow, I think we've basically covered everything. So, super excited. Hexfest is coming up. Please join us. It is virtual. We're all in quarantine. The magical community, you're supporting teachers, you're supporting readers, you're supporting all these things. And you'll have unlimited access to these great teachers. Initiates of many different traditions, practitioners of many different traditions. So I encourage you to join us. It's going to be really great, the access of information you have, because these classes are all great. As a presenter and as a host, I barely ever get to see any of the classes. This year, I can actually go watch them all myself, which is fantastic. Talk about entertainment, right? And you get, people do provide really well when they know you're paying for it. I know I do. Like, this was just sort of, I don't know, something. I think maybe I did provide well, I don't know. But when I did the 2 classes that I charged for on Hex Education, I was like really wanting to give people something, because I was like, not craft, but, we did the Alexandrian soiree for free because that was craft, right? But yeah, totally join us. Don't know what's going on in Salem. We will get through this, guys. Somehow, some way, I've got an optimistic feeling about it. I don't think that the worst is over, but I've got an optimistic feeling about it. Despite all the doom and gloom. I'm not going to get into politics. I think some people are quite mad, but that's not the point. I think we're going to get through this. The Goetic spirits. Well, here's the whole thing. The Goetic spirits are spirits that nobody really knows what they are. I don't recommend them. The main reason I don't recommend the Goetic spirits is because I don't know anyone who's worked with them who've had positive results, including Mr. Crowley. So it's not a demon thing for me, because I'm quite well aware of the word daemon and the connotations and what have you. I don't like associating the craft with it, because completely different ideology. And when it comes to magic, personally, I'm like, you don't need to use everything. You use what works and what you need to use. If you're coming from a religious perspective, you should stay within the constructs of that religion, really, I would think. But if we're going to talk about magicians who don't necessarily have a religious context because they're just magicians, I don't know of someone who's gone down the Goetia role who's had, I think they're parasitic spirits. What they were, what they could have been, I think that there's a modern thought form that's not modern in our lives, but modern within modern occultism that's been built up around them. They're the kind of things that, like the genie who will give you 3 wishes, but really I've got an agenda. They want to be worshipped. And I've noticed people that go down that road get strangely attached to them with no reason. I've known quite a few people, and on retrospect, I think Aleister Crowley is a genius on some level and a fool on another. I do love the poem he added, the Bornless invocation that he added to that book. But that's not a part of the original Goetia. It's nothing to do with it. They're just like some of the spirits in the Key of Solomon. They're unknown spirits. And I would just ask one why they need to invoke a spirit they don't know anything about. Even if you have a theory of what it might have been. Not a fan. Sorry, tangent. But it's not based on me being ooky spooky about demons. We have Pazuzu statues in our house. And other things. But I think they're parasites. I'm not afraid of them. I think they're parasitic spirits. I don't know what caused that or where they come from. I've got no idea. That's my psychic impression. They want you to work with them. And they'll give you just enough to get in. Like larvae or worms. That's my psychic impression. If you want to invoke demons, I can give you some real ones. Known ones. Ones with actual reputations. Not theoretical ones. Like this might have been, this might have been a god. This might have been something. The egregore behind them is not good. Don't recommend it, but, do you. I believe in freedom. You do you. I don't think it's a sin. I think when you're practicing the art magical, Luke is talking about the Goetia again. You're practicing the art magical, you know, you're playing with fire anyway. So good luck to you. I wouldn't advise it, nor would I teach any of my students that they should be doing it. Not out of fear, out of wisdom. But I too in my youth experimented. I once summoned the devil in an addict, like I've done things. Have I worked with any spirits that scared me? I have encountered spirits that have scared me. I have felt dread in moments where I think that you should, but not in a frightened away sort of sense. I just gravitated to things that I've gravitated to and not to things that are not. I think a big thing that's missed in magic and occultism is results. If something's not serving you in the big long term, why do it? You know, and if something is serving you in the big long term, why do you need something else? You know, if you are working with, we'll just say Pan. Let's just pick Pan. You start working with Pan and you're like, I'm a devotee of Pan. Pan's my man. Pan, Pan, I-O Pan, right? Which was one of my first gigs, and I love me some Pan. Why would you stop? Why do you need to go to something else if it's working for you all the time? You know, if it's working. I suspect people jump to all these other things because it's not working. I think occultists are naturally curious, but I also think that people chase dragons when their magic's not working sometimes. That, to me, that's the only logical ball bouncing. I've experimented with certain things, but to be true, my cosmology has remained craft because the god and the goddess work for me. Craft works for me. And I look at it through other lenses, but I don't need anything else. I don't. It's all I need to make anything happen. Invocation to what? You know, that's a vast question. If you're invoking something, you know, what is it you're invoking? You know, we say in Alexandrian craft that we don't invoke the gods. We kind of do, but the point is there we ask them in, we invite them. We don't command them. And I get the occult difference between invocation and evocation, but that wasn't always clear in some verbiages. Yeah. Depends on the god. Should you invoke every god? Just like I'm saying about the Goetia, there's some gods that may not resonate well with you. You know, if I'm doing a witchcraft circle and invoking Jesus, what's going on there? Just like, what's happening? You know, if I'm doing a witchcraft circle and doing it from the Book of Shadows and Kalimon, 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 Buddha, 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 what's going on there? So once again, vast. Depends on what you're doing. In a witchcraft circle, I suggest you invoke gods of witchcraft. Gods of nature and magic. Anyway, I think I've probably gone on long enough, but you guys have been so entertaining with all these questions, and it's been much better than I thought it would be. Jesus would probably be fine with it. He'd be like, let me make you some wine out of magic. Let's all talk about this. I do think that within the occult and within the craft that we should definitely be working towards kindness and benevolence. And I think the ooky spooky, it's just that. You know, whether it's I'm such a badass occultist, I'm going to summon a demon. Or look how Aleister Crowley I am. Let's look at manifestations and results. Let's look at those. And let's be honest about them. Your own included. If you work at McDonald's, you're not mastering the universe. And I'm not saying that to be a snob. I'm saying it because it's true. Know thyself. Doesn't mean you couldn't master the universe. Christian used to work at McDonald's. He's quite proud of it. So it's not a judgment thing, it's a reality check thing. Know where you are and what's actually going on. If you want to embrace controlling the universe, and you need to resort to whatever you need to resort to, well, the one thing I'm going to say as an occultist that's outside of my religious paradox, or paradigm, paradox, is it working truly and really? Feeling power is not the same as wielding it. And that's all I'm going to say and leave us with tonight. Thank you all for joining me. Please join us for HexFest. If you want to write a book, please contact me. If you want to do an occult class, please contact me. And we look forward to seeing you again at Covendom. All right. Good night, everyone. See if I can turn this off.